And we are live. We're live. Thank you for joining us. If you're watching this on the replay, you can fast forward 10 minutes and we will get started. We'll get this, whatever this is, started. Let's update that. Let's put something in the chat room saying that we are indeed live. And in here. And the tweets and the Google Pluses and the Facebooks will go out not long, soon, a few minutes. Why is my dock still up? Make that go away. All right. What else can we get rid of? We can get rid of bookmarks on the bar because that gets in the way. Really could almost get rid of the address bar, but that's okay. You get to see the address bar with me. Let's see if we got cameras. Let's do cameras, shall we? There's program. This is too short. Does this need to come down just a tad? It really does, but or I need to go up just a bit. I'm going to worry about that in my future. Hello, Mel. Yes, Security Plus is today. Security Plus, and then I get a week off. Then there's nothing next week. What's up with that? That doesn't seem right. I should be forced to do something instead of taking off a week. And then next month's crazy. It's long week. There are 5 Wednesdays in that month. I've got a study group on the 1st, then we skip a week, and then there's 2 more, and then we skip another week. 2 weeks off in a month. Again, doesn't seem right, but there it is. It's my bye week on the championship. You know, it's bothering me. It needs to come down just a tad, just a little bit. Maybe if I sat up in my chair, would that help? Helped a little bit. If I got closer, that help? Now it's just creepy. Maybe just a little bit. I'm gonna bring it down just a little bit, just a tad, just to stop messing with it. Stop it. Don't touch it. What are you doing? All right. All right. Just study group going on. What are you thinking you're doing? Let's see what we're doing here. Let's see if that looks better. I think it does. I think that does look better. So we're gonna go with that. I'm sure it'll be fine. It's not lazy. It's me not wanting to touch anything before we go live. You don't want to touch anything. You don't want to mess anything up. Because then you go through an entire session and the whole thing is all out of whack. It's crazy. Okay, but that works. What's next? What's next is we get this thing started in 6 minutes and 30 seconds. That's what's next. What do we want to do? I want to do that slide. Go. There we go. So that's working. Work gig. What else is running? Or not? Don't need that, don't need that, don't need that. I do need that. Okay. Emails are done. See how quick that was? What else is going on? I think this is it. This is me getting through this because I have 12 other things I need to do over the next 2 weeks, over the next week and a half. I guess next 2 weeks, really. The study group takes time to prep, so it takes like a half a day at least, and then another numbers of hours to kind of post things, prep it on YouTube, get the graphics done, all of that. So I kind of block off a day for study group prep. So if you got one of those on Wednesday, you know, my Monday or my Tuesday is pretty much captured. And I've got other things going on that aren't moving as fast as I would like them to, but I think that's normal, right? That's kind of how it works. I wish it was done in a day. No, it takes 3 months. Oh, okay. That's a little bit different. Can we get it done now? No. 2 months and 29 days. What's next? I think that's it. I'm already recording before we went live, so you can see little Cylons going on down there. That's my recorder, my video recorder. 2 separate streams. It's recording both what you see and what you don't see. There's always, you can even see it in front of me. I've got a picture of me to the left. That's my preview. So it's recording my program and my preview simultaneously. That way, if I do need to go back and edit something, I can go back and edit sort of the preview information into it if I miss something. Sometimes I do that. Sometimes I don't hit a camera. You know, I'll take this camera and something will be going on that camera, you know, somewhere else, and then you'll miss the whole thing. So I will sometimes do a post edit. Usually I don't. Usually I don't touch it. As soon as the study group's over, it's live and you get to see it. The only thing I want to do is, you'll notice if you're watching this live or on the replay, the highest resolution 720p, because that's what my current system uses as its maximum amount of resolution that it can broadcast. So I'm looking to get a separate device to do the streaming that can support 1080p. And that way the final video will be full HD. You can kind of watch this on a 1080p monitor and see at least the best resolution that YouTube can give you, which isn't necessarily that great, but it's better than 720p, right? And I've got the bandwidth, so all I need to do is get a device that will do that. That's the real challenge. Okay, 3D. I knew somebody would want to take it to the next level, and I've been looking at that. We'll put the camera ball right here, and you can kind of rotate around. I'll just have to look over it, I guess. Maybe I put it in my head, then you won't see me. Maybe I put it here. You can't see that. I put it right here, and you can kind of watch. That's a bad angle. Have to put it where but see, behind me, you're seeing everything. Like behind there's a television that has the streaming information, but there's nothing else back there. So you're seeing the entire, when you see this view and you see this view, you see the studio. That's it. So there's not much more to do there. Virtual reality. I will have my VR stuff is being delivered tomorrow. My Vive will be here tomorrow. I get to try that out. It's really not mine. It's really my son's, but I'm going to try it out. So there you go. What are we doing on time? We got 2 minutes. We're doing good. Dun, 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 dun. 3D would be something like the camera's right there. Like it's right there. Oh my gosh, there's something going on right in front of the camera. There's not a lot of action in this particular broadcast. Yeah, I don't use software for broadcasting. I use all hardware. I've looked at OBS. OBS is great, but it's not what I do here. Software just has an enormous number of limitations associated with it. So I like to do everything in hardware. There's just a huge number of advantages to that. And there's a number of boxes that you can get that are these tiny little boxes. They're, an index card size box that will stream 1080p. I don't have to have a separate computer. There doesn't have to be any extra software because I'm taking care of all the switching here. You can see, well, you can't see, but my switching console is here. So all the switching, I already got software and hardware set up to do switching. Everything is, all the cameras are connected together. So you get camera 1, camera 2, camera 3, camera 4 kind of thing. All I need is something to broadcast. Just something to do the actual streaming to the content delivery network, the CDN, which in this case is YouTube. But it could be anything. I could make it anybody, but currently it's YouTube because it works out well, and it's, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh yeah, free. It's free. All right, let's do a study group. Boy, that was abrupt, wasn't it? Just boom, there's the study group. I'm supposed to kind of ease into it, but let's go live, shall we? Hello, everyone. Welcome to the May 2016 Professor Messer Security Plus Study Group. I am James Messer, your host for the next hour of Q&A dealing with topics from the Security Plus exam. This is something we do every month where I sit down, I put together some questions, and then I ask you the questions live here, and then you have a way you can actually answer online. So we get to see what everybody's response is to these questions that I'm going to be asking of you. There is quite a bit that we have to go through this month. What I usually do is in the first hour is I ask you those questions for the Q&A, and in that first hour you can actually get some continuing education unit credit if you already have your Security Plus or your Network Plus or your A Plus and you're watching this for continuing education unit credit. And I'll tell you exactly how to do that at some point during this first hour. And in the second hour, I just turn on the phone lines. You can call in. You can put questions in the chat room. I just hang out. Well, we can ask any questions you'd like about anything. Sometimes people will talk about Security Plus. Sometimes they'll talk about other certifications. Sometimes they talk about the studio. Sometimes they talk about gaming. Sometimes they talk about current events. Doesn't matter to me. We can talk about really anything. I want to thank everybody for your support through the month. I would not be able to do these study groups without your help. And of course, if you'd like to be able to watch all of my Security Plus videos, they are available for you to watch online. You can either go to ProfessorMesser.com and look at my entire index of Security Plus videos. Every minute of every video is available online. This is not something you have to purchase to be able to watch this entire series. But if you want this offline, or you want an MP3 that you can listen to in your car, or you'd like to have the course notes included with this, I'll talk about the course notes later. I have a package that puts all of these things together. If you'd like to learn more about that, you can find it at ProfessorMesser.com/GetSecPlus, and you'll be able to view all of those things. Now, I told you can do Q&A on this as well, right? Well, you can do this online. You can either pop open a new browser window in your current browser that you're watching this on, or if you have a mobile device, there are mobile apps that you can download for your iOS device, your Android device, your Windows mobile device. There's even, I think, a Chrome app, a Chrome extension you can have in your Chrome browser, and that will do the Socrative type function. If you are opening up a new browser, you can go to Socrative.com and click the student login because you are the student. Don't click the teacher login. That's mine. You click the student login, and then it will ask you to go to a particular room. The room you want to go to is Professor Messer. All one word, ProfessorMesser. It rhymes, but it doesn't have the same vowels in there. So you have to make sure you spell it properly. And if you do, you'll see something like this that says, how long have you been studying for your Security Plus certification? And you've got less than 3 months, 3 to 6 months, 6 to 9 months, 9 months to a year, over a year, or I already have my Security Plus certification. But you have to be able to type in the Socrative.com. You have to be able to go to the right room. If you're not seeing this question in the room, that means that you type something wrong, probably with the room name, especially if nobody's in the room at this point. And once you do, you'll see, I can see even live on my side, people are answering. 60% of you watching have been doing this for less than 3 months. So you're just getting into it. You want to be able to learn more about some of these topics. I will certainly step through those things. 16% of you already have your Security Plus certification. So some of you will certainly be learning more about the continuing education units later on in the hour if that's something you'd like to do. Many people will just get a higher level certification to renew all of their lower level ones, but that's completely up to you. The Security Plus certification has been around for a bit of time. It was released in April of 2014. We're already certainly just past April of 2016, so you probably will see an update. They usually update every 3 years or so. So I would think in April of 2017, next year about this time, they would have probably already announced or released even the new version of the Security Plus certification. And then there's usually a 6 to 9 month overlap. So it's entirely possible that you'll be able to take this version of the Security Plus into even the end of 2017, maybe the beginning of 2018. There is one exam that you need to take to pass the Security Plus, but it is a tough one. There are 90 questions, 90 minutes long. You have to make a 750 on this weird scale between 100 and 900. We really think the questions are weighted. Every single question has a different number of points, so you really can't get a percentage out of that. It's really a bit of a challenge. And you'll see that the exam has both multiple choice questions on it and something CompTIA calls performance-based questions. So you want to think about those pieces as well. Now, make sure that if you are planning to take these exams, that you're absolutely able to think about all of the topics associated with this. And that's why I put up on the screen the CompTIA Security Plus Certification Exam Objectives. Make sure that you have these exam objectives. They are incredibly important for you to have. They will tell you everything you need to know about the Security Plus exam. So make sure you download those from the CompTIA website as well. Pretty important. Let's also kind of get into answering the questions then. I think we've now gone through the beginning part of this and we understand what the exam is about. I'll talk more about the exam and some of the details later on. But let's start answering some questions. I put together a number of questions for you. I want to see if you can answer them. So here's our first question of the study group. In which of the following would you be most likely to use steganography? And you will see that if you are looking on your Socrative front end, either on the Socrative website or on your app, suddenly the question has changed. So you can see that there are a number of answers available on the screen. One of the answers is to digitally sign a document sent to another person, to encrypt a file with asymmetric encryption, hide data within a container document, encrypt data over a wireless network, or create an encrypted tunnel between two devices. One of these would be used, or most likely to be used, if you're using steganography. Now notice that the exam question as it's written, I tried to emulate some of the style from the CompTIA exams. They tend to ask these questions where you need to do the best possible thing, or the next best option, or what are you most likely to do? Because some of these answers could actually apply. You could have multiple answers apply to this question, but only one is going to be the most likely reason that you would use steganography. So maybe if you know the answer, don't answer in the chat room. Don't Google it. Stop Googling steganography. All of you, stop that. Pretend you're sitting in the exam and you're ready to take this exam. You should be able to take a guess at this and decide. I'm trying to get at least half of you to get this one right and maybe half of you to think that it might be something else, because I think if you get it wrong, you will be able to learn something. That's the whole point of this, is to be able to figure out that, oh, I didn't realize that. So make sure you can go out to, for those of you wondering, Socrative.com, to the student login, the room name Professor Messer, and you will be able to answer this particular question. By the way, if you're watching this live on the YouTube stream, there's a chat room I'm looking at on my website, so you can always go to professormesser.com/live, and you can participate in that chat room as well, because I'm watching you guys send this information back and forth over the chat room. So let's get our answer here. Let's see how we did. And which of the following would we be most likely to use steganography? Well, we've got one that is, I guess you could say, the clear winner. 73% said hide data within a container document, but we have double digits kind of tied for second as to digitally sign a document sent to another person or encrypt a file with asymmetric encryption. So it might be one of those two, single digits for the last two, which are encrypt data over a wireless network, or to create an encrypted tunnel between two devices. I suspect some of you know what this particular answer is and how it works. So let's have a look at what steganography is and how it works. Steganography is a Greek term, means concealed writing. Well, if it's concealed, then it's absolutely going through and trying to obscure information. And for steganography, we're putting a bit of information, generally it's put within an image. So you can make an invisible message and hide it within all of these weird bits within an image, because you can take certain number of these bits and change the color slightly, or misputting in a couple of pixels here and there. And instead of putting the pixel that associates with that color, you can instead put a pixel that has something to do with the data coming through. So you might have a table of information that you're adding. The container document itself, like the image, is the cover text. You'll see this referred to if you're building your own steganography. There's many of tools out there that are absolutely free. You can put them on your own computer, take an image, you can put your own information in it, send it to someone else, and have them pull the information out. All of these exist in the world. In fact, you may even have steganography already happening on your network or in your organization or even at your house. There are a number of steganography techniques based on the network traffic themselves. Some of them, of course, will embed the information in an image similar to what we just saw. If you have a laser printer, you may find that on the laser printer, there's these tiny yellow dots that will appear somewhere on the page. And those yellow dots are different on everybody's printer. It's almost like a serial number or a fingerprint. And if somebody sees a printout, they can look at those yellow dots and know exactly what printer that came from, or at least match it back to a printer and where it came from. I think that's a real key to be able to take care of those things and be able to work through where that particular printout came from. So good for you. Well, before we go to the next question, let's see how you did with this one. So in this case, indeed, hiding data within a container document would indeed be the correct answer. The 74%, you guys did that absolutely correctly. Now, the other 25 or 26% of you, it's not digitally signed a document sent to another person. That indeed is done with asymmetric encryption. And encrypting a file with asymmetric encryption, the encryption part really isn't done. Now, certainly with steganography, you could encrypt the data that you're putting within the image. But that wasn't, as we said, the most likely thing you would do with steganography, or really the best answer here. Your best answer is that you're hiding data within a container document. Another key thing about the exam is don't read too much into these questions. The questions are asking for a very specific thing, and they're directing you towards a very specific answer. Make sure you follow the path that they're giving you. I think that's pretty important to be able to do that. And steganography, of course, no, people in the chat room, indeed, it has nothing to do with dinosaurs, although it sounds a lot like that. That is one where we know steganography is part of the exam objectives. Again, if you have not gone to Google and typed in CompTIA exam objectives security plus, you're doing yourself a disservice. You need to be able to look at all of those things in the exam. Well, I think some of you saw one of the other questions pop up. So let's do another question, shall we? We have, in which of the following would you commonly see IPsec used? Another question where I'm giving you this term and I'm expecting you to know what this term means. So that's when you should absolutely step through these questions and answers and make sure you understand what those things are. So in which of these would you commonly see IPsec used? Would it be to create an encrypted tunnel between two devices? Would it be to securely delete a file from a storage device? Would it be to encrypt a file with asymmetric encryption? Would it be to digitally sign a document sent to another person? Or would it be to encrypt data over a wireless network? In which of the following would we commonly see IPsec used? This is really one of the most important pieces of the exam, is we want to be able to answer the question as it applies to what's being asked. Never read more into the question than what they're giving you on the exam. Every question is self-contained. Don't make any assumptions about the information associated with the question. You should always read through the question, understand exactly what's being asked, and make sure you look for the special terms like what would you commonly see? What is the most likely thing you would see? What is the next best thing that you should do? Those are the things that will direct you. Look for the word not. Those usually trip me up, is I'll read through the question very quickly. I'll miss that the word not was in there. I'll see the first answer that applies to what I'm looking for, click it, and of course, I'll get it incorrect. So that's one is pretty important to understand. Now, if you are trying to figure out these pieces, it's important to step through and answer these questions. Just take a stab at it. Even if you don't know what this is, go out to Socrative.com, click the student login, and go to the Professor Messer room, and you will be able to do that. Let's see how we did with this one. In which would we commonly see IPsec used? Well, I've got two answers. Again, we've got one that's sort of a majority of the answers. 80% said to create an encrypted tunnel between two devices, but 14% said encrypt data over a wireless network. It sounds like there's some type of encryption going on or hiding some of that information. So which one would it be between those two? Because you can see hardly anybody selected any of the others that are in between. Let's talk about IPsec. Whenever you hear the term IPsec, it really stands for Internet Protocol Security, but we never call it that. We just call it IPsec. It is a tunnel that's being created almost always between two sites. It does not have to be a tunnel, but it's a way to encrypt data between point A and point B is how it's most commonly used. When we talk about creating an IPsec connection, it's almost always for encryption, and it's almost always in a tunnel form, but it does not have to be. It's one of those things where you've got lots of options, and more than probably anything you'll be setting up that merge networking and security together, IPsec is an enormous merge of these technologies with tons of options. You almost never get IPsec connected correctly the first time. Even the trained professionals that are sitting down and connecting these devices, and usually these devices are different. You might have a firewall from one vendor on one side and a firewall from another vendor on the other side. IPsec is a standard, so theoretically, these devices should communicate to each other. But the terms that are used in the configuration and the method that is used to send the data might be very different on both sides. So you almost have to be a translator of both languages to be able to do that. That is one of the advantages of running IPsec, is that's an open standard. And generally, if it says it can create an IPsec tunnel, then generally it can create that tunnel to anything else that is an IPsec compatible device. Usually it's two sites that are doing that. But you can also create a tunnel or a connection that's encrypted between an end station and, say, a firewall, or between two end stations even. It's a standard. Doesn't matter who's setting up the tunnel or the encrypted communication. You can really have anything on both sides to be able to do that. So let's see how we did with this one. Many of you answered this one and said, yes, it's used to create an encrypted tunnel between two devices is one of the ways you would commonly see IPsec used. And indeed, answer A would be absolutely correct. Now, we know that answer E, encrypt data over a wireless network, although IPsec could be used over any type of network, a wide area network, a wireless network, a wired network, it doesn't matter. The question here is, which of the following would you commonly see IPsec used? And the most common way in the list of available answers to you is to create an encrypted tunnel between two devices. That indeed is the best answer, and that is how you would absolutely want to answer these if you get a question like this. Notice those are actually two answers that IPsec, absolutely. A and E seem to be perfectly valid answers if we want to say, where can I use IPsec? That wasn't the question. The question in which of the following would you commonly see? Which of these would be the most common use of? Which of these would be the best description of? That's what you're really looking for in those particular questions. Just make sure you read through those questions really, really, really well on the exam. Makes a huge difference in being able to do that. Let's do another one. We're really getting into this now. So let's do a question where we're getting outside the scope a little bit, where I'm asking you about PII. The question is, which of these best determines how an organization will manage PII? That is PII. It's not an L. It's not a 2. It's not P2. It's not a Pentium 2. That's a PII. So of course now you have to know what PII is. Now don't Google PII. Stop it. Take a guess. You're sitting here on the exam. You have to take a guess. You have no other resources available to you. Which of these best determines how an organization will manage PII? So not only do you have to know what PII is, you have to know how an organization will manage it. Fortunately, I have some options for you. It could be through a privacy policy, a firewall rule, an AUP, an EULA or a EULA, or a certificate authority. Which of these best determines how an organization will manage PII? If you think you know, don't answer in the chat room. You can pop open a new browser window and go to Socrative.com, click the student login, and go to room name Professor Messer, and you can answer which of these might best determine how an organization will manage PII. I have a feeling I'm not making these hard enough for you on this particular session. I've got some harder ones coming, I think, that you will like a lot. I don't like it when there's people that know the answers. You people are being too smart about this today. Fortunately, knowing the answer to this particular question is going to help you a lot, because this is absolutely a topic that could come up on the exam. This is one where whenever you start working through the details of this, it's pretty important to know everything that might be asked of you. And the Security Plus exam is massive in the number of things that might be asked of you. So make sure you know what all these topics are. And I think you guys do know what this topic is. I think you know what PII is. I think it helps that PII itself has certainly been in the news quite a bit lately. That's one where really you see a lot of this in the news. So let's see how we did. Which of these best determines how an organization will manage PII? Again, a large number, 80%, said through a privacy policy, but 7% said an AUP, 5% said certificate authority and firewall rule, and then 3% said a EULA. So one of these got obviously a huge number of options and huge number, that 80% is a big number. So let's talk about PII. PII is the personally identifiable information, and it is almost always part of a privacy policy. This is one where the piece that really is the challenge, especially with any of these, is knowing all of these different topics. So knowing what PII is and how it's managed is going to be your key for being able to do this. This is really important. So if you start looking at what type of data is being stored by your organization, is it Social Security numbers? Is it medical information? Is it credit card numbers? All of these are things that could be considered PII, personally identifiable information. And of course, it can be important to understand this from a privacy perspective. This is one where the bad guys would love to get their hands on, especially credit card information, Social Security numbers, anything that they can use financially to take that money away from you. There was a good example of this in July of 2014 that was found in hotels. And many of you that travel around, you stay in some of these hotels. The hotels have this really nice business center. Almost all of the ones you go to will have a computer set up or a room of computers so that you can go down, you can print some things out. Usually you grab your USB key because you're working in the room, but then you need a physical printout to hand to somebody tomorrow because people are fixated on paper for some reason. So you go down to the business center, you print out your graphs, your charts, your presentation, you staple it up, and you took it down on a USB key. So when you plug the USB key in, that is where the bad guys either are infecting the USB key, or in this particular example, they've already infected the machines that are in the business center, and they're watching you type in your credentials. And that key logged information, of course, goes back to the bad guys. They see you logging into your bank. They know what the login information is. They can now use those details. They see you typing in credit card numbers to pay for things. This is where the struggle is with being able to manage this PII. So you absolutely need to understand the importance of this and understand that an organization manages this and tells everybody how they're managing it through a privacy policy. So if you're one of the folks that answered A, privacy policy, 80% of you got that one absolutely right. Well done. The Security Plus exam is big. Of all of the exams I work through, this is one where I think it's really a challenge to know everything that could possibly be on the exam. What I've done is taken every single thing that I have put into my videos, and my videos for Security Plus are the most extensive of any other course that I've done. And these course notes really speak to that quite well. The course notes themselves are 36 pages of notes, as if you sat down to every video, you wrote down every single bullet that I have on the screen, you took all of the graphics and the information associated with them, and you put them all in a PDF file. And that's exactly what I've done. This is the Security Plus course notes that I've created. These come directly from my videos. The graphics are in here, the charts that I've created, the network diagrams that I've created, all of the text that I've put into all of my videos, they're all in here. So if you're somebody who you just don't like writing your own notes, you don't want to go through every single video, or maybe you're somebody who appreciates that the entire Security Plus course is available online and you'd like to contribute something back to help keep the site going, this is a great way to do that. It's only $10 for this entire PDF. This is obviously something that does not replace your book. It doesn't replace the videos. It's a way to take notes. It's a way that I took the notes for you instead of you taking the notes. So that's one of the nice things about this. It doesn't tell you everything that the videos have. It doesn't tell you everything that's in a book. It's you taking the notes of the most important things and having them in there. This is pretty enormous. It took me a long time to take everything out of there and put it into these course notes, and I hope you can appreciate all of the content that I've crammed into every single one of these notes. Folks in the chat room, the folks that have it, thank you so much. The notes are very good. I got the notes. They're great. It's worth it. I want to thank you for your support of the website. Thanks for getting the notes. I'm glad you found them useful, and I think you'd find them useful too. If you'd like to see more about them, you can visit my website at professormesser.com/securitycn for security course notes. And that's one where maybe you could like to also help contribute back and keep the websites running. I want to thank everybody who has purchased up to this point. It goes a long way to making sure this entire train stays on the tracks. I want to thank you so much for your support. Let's do another question, shall we? I think I've got another one for you. Which of these would best describe a client-side attack? Which of these would best describe a client-side attack? Let me click my button on the Socrative side. And if you'd like to answer this, by the way, you go to Socrative.com, click the student login, and go to Professor Messer. And I've got a multiple choice for you on this one. The multiple choice is, which would best describe a client-side attack? A DDoS overwhelms a service, a server configuration file is modified, and the administrator credentials are brute forced, an application API vulnerability is exploited, or unsolicited email messages are received. Let's see if I can say those properly one more time. Which of these would best describe a client-side attack? A DDoS overwhelms a service, a server configuration file is modified, the administrator credentials are brute forced, an application API vulnerability is exploited, or unsolicited email messages are received. One of these would best describe a client-side attack. So if you think you know the answer, don't answer in the chat room. Instead, you can answer on Socrative. Finally, I got one that folks are trying to figure out. They're trying to step through, what is this client-side attack? I was feeling kind of bad there. I want to make my questions hard. I want them to be something you can learn from, but I want them to also be something that will apply to you taking this exam, something you might run into. So hopefully this will help you. Let's see how we're doing with this one. I've clicked through on my side. I'm kind of taking a peek on my side to see which ones these are. Which these would best describe a client-side attack? Well, now, of course, you obviously need to know what a client-side attack is. And from there, you need to extrapolate which one of these things might be a client-side attack. And if I look at this, of course, I asked the question to best describe it. And if I look at these, really only one of these five really fits a client-side attack. I'm not really seeing something that I would fit. Maybe two of them could be, but it's really such a gap between those two. Only one of these really best describes a client-side attack. So I think that would be really good to look at. Let's see how we did with this one. If I clicked, how did we do? We are right down the middle. We have a 5-way tie. Really a 4-way tie, I think. If we go to the number one, I guess 30%, 29%, the largest number of people, certainly well short of a majority, said that application API vulnerability is exploited, but it's a 3-way tie for second. A DDoS overwhelms a service, the administrator credentials are brute forced, unsolicited email messages are received. That's a little bit of a challenge. So make sure, by the way, also, as you step through these and trying to figure it out, no mentions in the chat room as to what you think it might be. We'll find out together as we look through this. So let's talk about client-side attacks and what they are. And that might help you understand more about what we're trying to do. With these particular types of attacks, one of the things we traditionally think about when somebody is attacking something is they're going after a server. We always see this in the movies. Let me hack into the server. Oh, they're now in my server and getting into my server and attacking things. Well, that's a server side attack. You're sort of attacking the server side of things to be able to gain access to data, to a device, to gain control of a device. But obviously, in many cases, there is not only a server, there's a client. We'll take something simple like web browsing. There's a web server and there's a web client. We call them browsers. You could be running Firefox or Chrome or Edge or Internet Explorer or any one of many different browsers, but you've got a client and a server. Well, if you want to gain access to the web server, what if you could gain access to the web server through the client? And that would be a client-side attack. Usually it's bad programming that allows you to somehow manipulate the client to either say something it shouldn't be saying to the server and gain access to that server, or to send something that we never typed in that somehow we got around the application itself and sent that information. And obviously there's so many clients that we could be looking through. It could be a client that's for email. It could be one that is an Office application. It could be the browsers that we're using ourselves. So obviously it's important that we keep all of our applications and are both on the server side and the client side up to date, because there are always updates to this that might prevent somebody from taking advantage of this. Now, if you're still trying to figure out, I still don't understand the difference between a server-side attack and a client-side attack, I've got a practical example. I read a really great article this week, so I wanted to show this to you. This is an article that is a very good example of a client-side attack. This is a user that was someone who had a bank account, and this is a security professional that had a bank account with a bank. He downloaded the bank account's applications and then started monitoring the communication between the client on his mobile phone and the bank server that was out there, and realized that he could modify the application programming interface, the API, the messages that are sent between the client and the server. He found that he could modify them to tell the server anything he really wanted to tell the server about transferring money. This is a little scary. He was able to send messages and transfer money between, in his particular case, one of his family members and his account. And he, of course, asked his family member, can I try transferring money from your account to mine without it asking you or you knowing about it? And I guess, sure, give it a shot. And he did, and it worked. So he found a number of vulnerabilities where the server wasn't doing the proper checks, and he was able to, he could have taken money from any account at that bank and transferred it into his account. How crazy is that? Because there were no checks set properly between the client and the server. He was able to manipulate the client, and it was a client-side attack that allowed him to do this. And they did not, I see other people read the article, they did not reward him for finding that bug. They just said, send him a thank you note. Hey, thanks. Thanks a lot. Now, of course, the bank themselves had no bug money. They had nothing published to say, if you find a bug, we'll give you money. It's something that many organizations do anyway, even if they don't do anything formal. But you should read this if you're trying to figure it out, or just read it anyway. Even if you don't understand the intricacies of everything going on, it's well written, and you can follow the story at boris.in/blog/2016/the-bank-job, and you'll be able to really see what a client-side attack can do. So in our case, going through all of these different options, vulnerabilities in an application API can be very bad, and the example of the bank's application is a very good example of that. You can find the application API vulnerabilities exploited. 28% of you got this one absolutely right. Everybody else kind of missed on that one. DDoS overwhelming a service is overwhelming the server. There's no client that you're manipulating. It's not client side, you're attacking a server. A server configuration files modified, again, attacking a server. The administrator credentials are brute forced. Usually not a client that's doing that. That's something on a server. Certainly doesn't fit the best example of a client side attack. I guess you could almost call it that, but we wanted the best description of a client-side attack. And unsolicited email messages are received. Again, that's just spam. That's not a client-side attack at all. So in these particular cases, the best example is indeed going to be D, an application API vulnerability is exploited. Wow, that was a good one, and apparently a little too hard. I'm trying to hit that 50% mark, so we need to see if we can do a little bit better with this one. Let's see if I made this one one that really takes advantage of this. Yeah, DDoS would not be a client-side attack. It would be you attacking a server. There's no real client-side attack on that one. The attack is really something that's not coming from a client. It's coming and hitting a server. So it's not really the best description of a client-side attack, is it? The best description is definitely that API, and indeed that article really described it nicely. Let's do another one, see if we can get through this one. What kind of security policy stops all applications from running unless they are previously approved? One of these, and being able to do it. Which would be the best possible way to make this work? If you think you know the answer, you can visit Socrative.com, the student log in and go to the Professor Messer room because I have answers for you. What kind of security policy stops all applications from running unless they are previously approved? It's a blacklisting policy, or a DOS policy, or a Trojan horse policy, or a whitelisting policy, or a user account control policy. So one of these would best describe exactly what we've written up here. If you think you know the answer, you can absolutely do that, being able to work through it. See if you happen to know and being able to work through that. What kind of security policy stops all applications from running unless they are previously approved? Maybe you know the answer. A number of you already have. You guys are jumping in with this one to try to figure it out. It's one that is really a bit of a challenge, being able to know what security policy is really stopping everything from running unless it's previously approved. This is a common way to set policies for applications. You can imagine how hard it is for someone who is managing a large environment to be able to know exactly what applications are running, how do you manage those applications, all of those different pieces. It's a little bit of a challenge. And being able to set different policies or different philosophies on how you do that is going to be important, not only for managing the applications running, but also how you manage these on a day-to-day basis. So let's look at the answers for this one. How did we do on this one? Well, it's almost split perfectly between two different ones. 70% said whitelisting, but 23% said blacklisting. No one said DOS. No one said Trojan horse. And only 7% said user account control. Maybe it's user account control. Maybe it's DOS. Maybe it's Trojan horse. Maybe we got fooled on this one. Let's see more about running applications and how these things would work. The challenge, of course, is if anybody can run any application, you run into these scenarios where malware can get easily installed on someone's device. People might run applications that haven't been tested on your network that can create problems communicating on your network. These applications might have vulnerabilities in them that a bad guy could take advantage of, and all because you allowed that application to run on the machines that are on your network. So your security policy is going to set how you're going to allow or disallow applications to run inside of your environment. And there's two really overwhelming philosophies, two certainly main philosophies that you will run into. One is a whitelist, which means nothing runs unless it is on a list of things that are approved. You will very commonly see this on mobile devices that are locked down, and occasionally you'll see it on devices inside of an organization, your Windows and your other devices as well. This is one where it's extremely restrictive because you effectively have said you can run Chrome, you can install this particular app and that particular app, these important apps, but you can't install any other application in the world, in the known universe. You can't do anything. And you might say that's very restrictive. Well, you're right. It's extremely restrictive. It's remarkably restrictive. And it's also a little more administration for the person doing this, because if suddenly a new application shows up and somebody can make a business case on why it's important to run that app, you now have to go into your application management utility and enable that particular application to run as well. So that is one where it's important to know that there's a little more administration associated with this. Blacklisting is the reverse of that, where there is nothing that's really stopping anybody from running unless it happens to be on a bad list, the blacklist. The blacklist is a real difficult way to do that. And of course, the blacklist, that's a little more common. You often see most devices you're able to install anything because people don't want to be bothered with constant administration of a whitelist. So they'll set up a blacklist instead and list out certain applications that you absolutely should not be installing. Very common to be able to do that. So I even see this integrated often in antivirus and anti-malware. Very common these days for executables to be run in a sandbox. They're checked to see if there's malware associated with them. If there is malware for that executable, they're automatically added to a blacklist. So it's almost a hands-off process to be able to do that. So when we look at this list, you can see that although blacklist and whitelist were really the number one and number two, we want to stop all applications unless they are previously approved, and that would be whitelisting. That is when you have blocked everything, and it is a single checklist of what is allowed that you need to absolutely be able to work through. 69% of you got that one right. If you answered D, whitelisting, you got that one absolutely right. The user account control is a process within Windows that stops certain applications from doing certain things on your computer, but it doesn't stop all applications from running unless they are previously approved. And blacklisting. That is, we talked about blacklisting being the reverse of whitelisting. Obviously, that would allow all applications to run unless they have been previously restricted. So a little bit different. So make sure you know the difference between those two and being able to work through all of those, being able to understand them. Sometimes it helps to begin implementing them. Put them in a lab. Try to understand, how could I make a blacklist or a whitelist work with these things? And one way you can do that is through a cloud-based system from GTS Learning called the GTS Learning Live Labs. These Live Labs allow you to run predefined labs in your browser with tons of virtual machines. The labs, the step-by-step labs, are already set up and running on your computer. It's a very simple way because you don't need to install any additional software. You don't need any special administration. There's no keys that you need. You don't have to install operating systems. It's all online. So if you wanted to know, we just did application security. Let's do application security and application data. And you can see on my screen, here's a server. Let's power that server on. Here's a client, the second machine, a gateway, a router, and a LAMP device. So a Linux device running PHP, a web server. So I've got 5 different machines that are already predefined for this lab. You can see a picture of the lab. It's kind of hard to see under my big head there, but you can kind of see it. And there's 2 big sections that take you step by step through everything you need to know for this particular lab. Very easy to step through them. The device here is booting up, and as it boots up, these devices become available, and I'm able to work through them. This is something that is always going to be available and something you can connect from anybody's browser because it uses HTML5 to be able to do this. If you have an older browser, you can even install Java and have that there. And there's a special price on this as well. So make sure that as you're looking to see if this is something you might want to do, make sure you are aware that if you go from the Professor Messer website, you get a little bit better deal than if you were to go directly to GTS Learning. And it's because I work with those nice folks over at GTS Learning. They do that special for us. One other thing I like about this is I don't have to have a lot of different operating systems. I don't have to figure these things out for myself. I can simply use the capabilities that are built into my browser to connect from anywhere and start using it. So my Windows Server 2008 R2 Enterprise is just booted up, and now I can start using the server and click over to the client machine. So we just started up this Windows device. There's a gateway and a router and a LAMP. These are full-blown Windows machines. I can either follow the lab or I can do something completely different in here as well. If you want to modify the mouse, it has nothing to do with this lab, but I wanted to show you this is not an emulation. It's not a screen where you step through individual things and it's simple screenshots that are here. This is a full-blown Windows, Linux, Windows Server, and a bunch of labs that are set up here. If you just wanted to get in here and mess around with Wireshark, start up Wireshark, don't even follow the labs, and let's just start a capture. And we can start capturing frames from the network in a Wireshark screen, or even load up things that you might have captured before onto here. And you can't mess anything up. This is all running on somebody else's virtual machine. It's something that's always running and available whenever you need it. And of course, you can find out more about this at professormesser.com/seclabs. There's the special price of $99 for the Security Plus Live Labs. Maybe you think you want it or not. If you follow that link, professormesser.com/seclabs. There, if you scroll down to the bottom, you can get a free hour. Try it out for yourself. See if it's something that makes sense for you, and then you'll be able to make the decision on whether this is something that really applies to what you're doing, or maybe it doesn't, but you'll be able to tell for free by running those for an hour. Might be something you want to try yourself. So I want to thank the folks at GTS Learning for their support and for the special pricing. And of course, you can take advantage of that at professormesser.com/seclabs. Let's go through another question, shall we? I've got plenty here. In which of these would you be most likely to see CHAP? This is not a question about anything happening in the United Kingdom. This is something specific to security. allegedly. So let's find out. Which of these would you be most likely to see CHAP? Would it be authentication to a router admin screen? Would it be encryption of application data? Would it be storage of data onto backup media? Would it be the verification of a certificate authority? Or would it be the validation of a sender's identity? One of these is going to be the most likely place you'll see CHAP. I think you may see it there, buddy, Mr. CHAP, and be able to work through those pieces. Let's see if you do know what would be most likely. If you do, stop Googling CHAP. You should just take a guess. Just take a stab. You can go to Socrative.com, go to the student login, and you too could find out more about this in the room named Professor Messer. You can answer the question. I'm going to take a peek, see how we're doing here. I love this question. Kind of threw you a few curveballs on this question because you really have to know CHAP. You really have to know what that's doing behind the scenes to really understand what this question's asking for. That's one of these, again, where you could see questions and answers where there's multiple answers, but again, it's asking for the most likely place that you'll see CHAP. Buddy, Mr. Pal. This is one that you will run into. I even mention in my video, maybe I don't mention the videos, but I've set up a number of these CHAP systems, even relatively recently. We'll talk a little more about what's good and bad about that in just a moment, but it's one where it's a very common way to do whatever this most likely thing is. How's that? How's that for not really telling you anything? How's that for a non-helpful hint to this piece? Let's just see how we did, shall we? Let's click the big button. How do we do? Well, it's a tie for first. We've got 35% said authentication to a router admin screen. 37% said validation of a sender's identity. Although we got nice double digits here for verification of a certificate authority and for encryption of application data, and only 1% said the storage of data onto backup media. So maybe it's not that one. You think? Maybe it's not exactly the 1%, or maybe it is. So what is CHAP? CHAP is the Challenge Handshake Authentication Protocol. And it is really you taking an authentication method, taking your username, taking the password, sending that information over the network. Microsoft has a version of this they call MS-CHAP. Very common to be able to use that. It's a three-way handshake where you are sending a challenge message is being sent, then you send this information back with your password hash. This password hash, that's nice that it's a password hash. It could also be one that is salted. So it's one where you could send really pretty private communication back and forth between two devices to be able to authenticate. And sometimes CHAP is set up so that within the same flow of information, occasionally a re-authentication will occur. Send that information back and forth. It's a very common process that you'll see on many different devices because it's a relatively simple process. It's been around for a very long time. It's one that is well understood. It's one that's easy for developers to code, so you see it quite a bit where the information is being authenticated back and forth. So the server is saying, oh, you want to talk to me? You need to authenticate. Here's your special key, and then you send back the information to be able to do that. Notice the information you're sending back. This is the hash. So I'm sending back a hash of my password. And you can see I have a very complex password of password 111. See, it's the 111 at the end that really makes it complex. So that hash that's going back and forth, you see, doesn't have that plain text password 111. That way, if somebody did capture this data, they would have the hash. They wouldn't have the actual password. They would have to do more brute force to be able to figure out what that happens to be. So in this particular case, you can see the entire process is really about authentication. So if you're one of the folks that said authentication to a router admin screen, if you answered A, you're one of the 36% that answered absolutely correct. The validation of a sender's identity is a very specific thing in the world of network security and of IT security. This is very important that you keep in mind that this validation of someone's identity is more than just username and password. We have no idea who typed in that username and password. There's zero validation of someone's identity that is integrated as part of CHAP. Now, there are many ways to validate someone's identity. You can do it with digital signatures. You can do it with digital certificates, especially in an authentication process. But I said, which of these would you be most likely to see in CHAP? And that is why that the authentication to a router admin screen is what you would most likely see in the standard CHAP configuration. So it's pretty nice to have that there. This is one that you will occasionally see even on very modern devices, because I mentioned it's very standardized. And by the way, if you are watching this for continuing education unit credit, then what you'll want to do is either go to the top or the bottom of any page on professormesser.com, and at the top and the bottom is a link for Contact Us. If you click that Contact Us link, it'll bring up a little form, and in that form, you want to put your name, your email address. You want to specify that this is the May 2016 Security Plus study group, because you could be watching from any May study group. I want to know it's specifically the Security Plus, and it's from May 2016. And you want to put the special code word of CHAP. And if you put that special code word, I know that you watched this video, and you will get a credit for an hour for being able to do that. This is one that I usually send these out about once a week or so. So if it takes a couple of days for it to get back to you, don't send me a message back wondering if I've completely lost it. Don't worry. I will get it back to you. Now, after a week or so, if you haven't heard from me, then something did go awry, and you can always try again. I usually get those back in a week, and I'm pretty responsive. I'm the one doing them. So if you want to put a note in there or make any comments, you could certainly do that as well. I read through them and then manually make sure I get the names and everything correct being sent back to you. And then I digitally sign this digital certification that you must have watched this. That way, when you receive it, if somebody wanted to confirm that it is actually for that date, for that time, for that 1 hour, you'll know that that is the way that it happened. You can't really change that. So that's a very useful thing to be able to do that and have those things there. Let's do another question then. Let's break these down and talk about another topic that might be pretty important in the world of IT security. And the question I have deals with non-repudiation. And the question specifically is, which of these would be the best way to implement non-repudiation? Again, I'm asking you for a very specific topic, and I'm asking you for the best way. Something, again, you get very commonly on the Security Plus exam. The possible answers are digital signatures, HTTPS sessions, role-based access control, symmetric encryption, and WPA2. One of these would indeed be the best way to implement non-repudiation. What way would that be? What way would that be to be able to make that happen? If you think you know the answer, you can go to Socrative.com to the Professor Messer room by clicking the student login and typing in PROFESSOR, and you'll be able to answer the best way to implement non-repudiation. Being able to do that. See if you happen to know what those are and the way they work through. See if you have an idea. I think many of you do know how non-repudiation works. I think I might have to make these a little more difficult. In the chat room, they're asking, any plans to do CASP training? No plans currently for CASP. More and more people seem to be taking CASP, but I don't see a huge number of employers asking for CASP. So I'm a little torn right now. I usually wait for the employers to ask for these things so that more and more people would want to get a certification. That's usually how I determine what I'm going to be doing next. And CASP just is, it's on my list, but it just has not made it to the top of that list yet. I think the information that's in CASP is good. I looked at the exam objectives, pretty good certification, but not quite there in the number of people wanting, needing, or driving those particular pieces. Well, let's see how we did with this one. The best way to implement non-repudiation. Let's see how we did. Well, we got a sort of a clear winner. I think if everybody, 80% of you chose digital signatures, but 11% chose role-based access control. So one of these is going to be really the best way to implement non-repudiation. Is it HTTPS sessions? Only 4% said that one. Only 4% said symmetric encryption. And nobody said WPA2. How dare you? Nobody? Yeah, I need to work a little more in these answers, I think, for you to really get the hang of these things, or you folks are just really smart at pulling up these things. Let's talk about non-repudiation. Non-repudiation means you wrote it down, you sent it to somebody, and then the person on the other end can confirm it really came from you. It didn't really come from someone else. It wasn't modified somewhere in between. Everything that's written down on this page, in this email, really did come from you. There's no way you can deny it. You can't take back what you said. You can't modify anything about what you wrote. That is non-repudiation. It's an incredibly important part of cryptography. It's an incredibly important part of being able to do business, because if I want to be able to sign something digitally, then I want to be able to make sure that when you receive it, it really did come from me. I don't want somebody else signing for me. I don't want somebody modifying the terms of the agreement after I've signed it. That's a little bit more of a problem. It has proof of integrity. There's proof of the origin. It's an important concept. And the best way to do this, as I just mentioned, is to digitally sign something. The digital signature is the important part of this. So you would digitally sign the files, the messages. What's important about this, by the way, is you don't have to encrypt anything. I can send an email in plain text. In fact, I'm going to send you your continuing education unit credit in plain text. You'll be able to read the email, but you'll see there is an attachment to the email, and the attachment is the digital signature. You could look at that with a text editor and see the digital signature inside of it. If you wanted to verify that it came from me, you can go to the public PGP web servers or PGP key servers or GPG key servers, because I'm using GPG. And you can grab my public key and you can check it and verify that nothing in that email has changed and that it really did come from me. Now, you can also take that email, you could change information. Oh, I didn't just sit for 1 hour. I sat for 10 hours. I had a 0 onto the end. But if you were to run that verification with my public key, the verification would fail. And that's one of the benefits of having non-repudiation and using those digital signatures. So that's a very useful thing. We use it all the time. We use it with the websites you visit. In fact, one of the answers that we had here was HTTPS sessions. Part of the way that we know that the encryption between our web browser and the web server is something that we can trust is that the certificates that are in use have been digitally signed. Now, in this particular case, it means that if something wasn't signed properly, or we're looking at a digital certificate that was not signed by someone we trust, we get some of these messages in our browser that said, whoa, I don't trust this certificate. Do you want to continue? And that's because it either has not been digitally signed, or it's been signed and it's been signed by a certificate that we don't trust inside of our browser. So you could often say, you could almost say that HTTPS sessions have a non-repudiation feature built into them, but that is not the way to implement non-repudiation. That is an implementation of non-repudiation. Certainly not the best example of all of the different examples we have. Indeed, the 75% of you that said digital signatures, you got that one absolutely right. That is the best way from the ones in this list to implement non-repudiation. It's one of the most common ways to implement non-repudiation and being able to work through them. If you are someone who is needing to do this type of signatures or verification, or send contracts through email, or be able to make sure that a web server you're connected to is something that's valid, one easy way to do that is by using those digital signatures, and that certainly helps with the non-repudiation. Now, one of the things that I've mentioned throughout this presentation today is you should always make sure that you have the exam objectives. This non-repudiation, all the encryption information we talked about, all the details about networking security, all of your client-side attacks, all of the things that we went through today and so much more are all in these exam objectives. I will very commonly have people come to my website. They'll be in the chat, because there's 24-hour chat. You can come anytime and talk to us. And the chat that's on there, they'll say, I didn't pass my Security Plus. I didn't do well. I grabbed a set of brain dump questions off the internet, and I just went in and took it, and I failed. It's a common story. And of course, it's very easy to say the brain dumps aren't going to help you, because ultimately they don't. But one of the things I always ask is, did you get the exam objectives and use them as a checklist? And of course, they did not. This is one of the most useful things that anybody who's giving you a certification will ever do for you. CompTIA probably goes well beyond any other organization in the amount of detail they tell you in these exam objectives. People often say, how do I know what's going to be on the exam? They've written down every single thing for you. There is no excuse for being surprised. If somebody comes to my chat room and says, I was not expecting to get that particular question on my exam, I had no idea what they were talking about, well, then you didn't read through the exam objectives, because everything is in there. And that's why if you look at my list of videos, they are numbered with the exact numbers from the exam objectives. I use the exam objectives as a checklist for the videos. So make sure you do that as well. It is incredibly important to be able to have those there. That is something that if you have not downloaded them already, go to the Google machine and type in CompTIA exam objectives and download the Security Plus objectives so that you can use these as well. Well, as you know, I do these study groups every month. And the next one for Security Plus is going to be in June the 22nd. For those of you that do watch things on the website or want to know what's going on, if this is past June the 2nd, or you're just wondering, when is that study group going to be again? You can always go to professormesser.com/calendar or anywhere on my website on the right toolbar. I always tend to put a list of the events there as well. Very easy for you to find. There is also in June, as I mentioned, 5 Wednesdays in June. If you're someone who likes to watch our A+ study group, our Network Plus study group, our Security Plus study group, they're peppered along those Wednesdays in June. So make sure you check the calendar for those. There's a lot more, of course, that's always going on here at Messer Studios. You can, of course, learn more about my course notes at professormesser.com/securitycn. And always, we've got things going on. Certainly on YouTube, you can find us and subscribe at professormesser.com/YouTube/Twitter/Google+. I put some funny pictures out on Instagram lately. A lot of what I do, I go through a lot of stock footage, and I just find ridiculous stock footage dealing with technology. And you'll find many of those on my Instagram page at professormesser.com/Instagram. Maybe you'll think it's funny too. And I put other things out there as well. I don't try to goof all the time. Sometimes I actually put exam questions out there that might help you. If you're planning to take your Security Plus exam, you can get 10% off by following the GTS Learning link for professormesser.com/vouchers and get your 10% off there as well. That will certainly help you. And of course, if you want to learn more about those live labs and get your free hour, you can find it at professormesser.com/seclabs. And I would not be able to do this, of course, without you. I want to thank you as well. Thanks for joining me during this hour. If you're watching us live or even on the replay, you can stick around for the next hour or so, or until my voice gives out. I'll open up the phone lines and we can just talk about anything. And that's something I like to do after these study groups, because who wants to sit for an hour and do this? Let's do it for 2. I want to thank you for joining us on this one. We'll see you next month on the study group. And if you'd like to send us a message anytime, you can go to the Professor Messer website to the Contact Us link. Otherwise, we'll see you next time on the Security Plus study group. Thanks, everyone. What is it with my voice today? Hello, hello, hello. I need coffee. If you go to professormesser.com/vouchers, the instructions are there, and they are indeed useful worldwide. Let's get the phone lines open. You can also ask questions in the chat room as well. We can always go through those. What am I doing? Where am I? What's my name? Let's go to my shows. Let's start a show. Let's host a show. What is the show? Then I call into the show as well. This is all in the cloud. It's all in the cloud. Let me see if I can adjust my microphone cord here so that doesn't do a thing. Let's see if I can call in to my own show. And then we could, you're welcome to call in. You don't have to. You could, of course, always, I'll give you the number in just a moment. You could, of course, ask in the chat room. Which is how we usually do it on Security Plus. Well, you're welcome. I know. Let me see. I will. How about that? Do I have to do a pound sign? Probably do.
Enter your 6.
I will. There we go.
Welcome.
Welcome. See, that's how I know I'm working. Welcome. Hello, chat room. Thanks for your chatting during the study group. Let's put up the phone number. If you'd like to call in, you can do that. Well, that's not the phone number. That is at +1 855 785 RJ45. That's the Skype free number. It's also toll-free number if you're in the U.S. at 855-785-7545. Very close. Yeah, it was a tough month. A lot of you knew these questions already. Every time I think I'm gonna make them hard, and of course you always surprise me, being able to do that. What would I recommend if you want to get a smart card for personal use? We usually don't use a smart card for personal use. You usually use it in conjunction with something you're connecting to so they know it's you. The smart cards that you see, and even in the credit cards that we have these days, there's the little chips that are putting on the credit cards themselves. And for the ones that you use as a smart card, you put a digital certificate on that card. And it's one that is assigned to you, and you're given the private key. The private key is on your card, and then your public key is kept or actually it's reversed. Your public key and your private key are combined. Actually, you can do either way. It works both ways to have it set up so that when you're plugging in your smart card, the other side recognizes that, checks the certificate, indeed it was you. They gave you a smart card. Well, they are the ones that would absolutely set those up. Now, there's a number of ways to do this, at least some type of additional authentication through your services. Even Twitter has two-factor authentication. Well, they will text you when you log into Twitter, so nobody can take that. The answer in the last question. Did I not do the answer in the last question? I'm pretty sure I did the answer in the last question, but what do I know? Indeed, it was digital signature, the 76% of you. That would be the best way to implement non-repudiation. I did talk about that. That was the answer in the last question. That was one. It's interesting because I use this digital signature every time I do my continuing education units. And of course, people get it and sometimes they don't know what it is. Like, what is this you stuck as an attachment? I can't open it. It's some ASC file, ASC file. I don't understand what that's about. That is one where it does become useful for those pieces. So in regard to the whitelist blacklist question, is blacklisting ever used? Absolutely. The philosophies behind how you implement security in an organization are done differently in every single organization. And there are some that have very little security controls and some that have the tightest security controls you would ever run into. So prior to doing this full time, I worked for a next generation firewall company for about 7 years. And I was able to go into the very large organizations in the United States and talk to their security people, understand how they've implemented security, and in some cases, implement my firewall into that security mechanism. And so there is a wide range of security controls people will do. Very few people do whitelisting because there's so much involved. But there's some organizations that are very conservative that want to very much limit what you're able to do on that computer, that want to limit where you can go on the internet to only specific sites. And that was one where, indeed, they absolutely have a whitelist set up, and you can only go to these whitelisted sites. Other sites are wide open, or they just do blacklisting. One of those things very commonly I did with this implementation on this firewall is that there would be a sandbox that ran executables for all my customers all over the world, and every time they found a bad executable, it went into a blacklist. And nobody that was a customer would be able to run that if they subscribed to that list, which was great because if they found a bad executable in the UK at 3 in the morning when they were coming at 3 in the morning my time, when they were coming in at 9 in the morning their time, then by the time I got into the office, it was already blacklisted. So it's kind of nice to have that there. So I couldn't never run something that somebody else had already found as being bad, almost like a groupthink or being able to crowdsource that piece of it. And being able to run these in a sandbox was great because then you could have something else run the executable without fear of your machines getting infected with that malware. Very useful to have that there. That's one where that was a great job too, because you were able to see so many different security implementations. And there are many commonalities throughout everybody's organization. Everybody has a firewall. It's very common, but not everybody does URL filtering. Not everybody does URL filtering the same way. Not everybody does intrusion prevention. Not everybody does intrusion prevention the same way. That's where you get into the nuances of what do you want to allow and what do you want to stop? How aggressive do you want to be? Do you want to potentially stop legitimate traffic because no security system is foolproof? So that's one of the challenges of being able to do that. You get continuing education credits for the Security Plus group by watching the Security Plus group, and sometime within the watching of the group, I tell you how to get continuing education credits, which is part of you being able to get the continuing education credit. So if you watch the previous hour, sometime within that previous first hour, I will tell you exactly how to get continuing education credit. That's a little bit of a challenge. Yeah, but don't worry. If you can't get the live stream, some of you during the chat, I saw that you were at work. Your work restricts what you can do to YouTube, and you can't see this. But as soon as this is over, it immediately converts itself into a permanent video. So I don't even have to touch it. I just stop streaming. It takes a minute or two to convert itself, and then it's available in perpetuity. And you can go home at night. You can watch the entire thing, which, of course, if you're in the chat room saying that you can't watch the video, you heard none of that. See how that works? But maybe in the rewatch, you'll say, oh, you were talking about me that was in the chat room, and being able to do that. You know, one of the things I wish I had was a different way to deploy out these things. So if you wanted to just listen in, maybe I could have an audio only stream. I don't know why I haven't done that yet. That really is an easy one. And get an audio only stream going. It's just a separate machine I need to get running. We talked about this at the beginning in the pre-show, is I want to have a separate device that's also streaming this at 1080p. And some of those devices can not only stream at 1080p to one content delivery network, but it could stream, for instance, audio to a different content delivery network that dealt with audio. So you could be on your mobile device and connect in very low bandwidth. Maybe it's something that's not restricted. I understand YouTube, which is how I do this video currently. YouTube is restricted in a number of locations. So that's one that is, I understand. You can't see it. You can't access it. And there's no feedback in the chat room whatsoever as to what these are. Maybe you at least got into Socrative, but you don't hear what the answer is. And I don't check in Socrative that you'll see if you got it right. You know, maybe I'll try that on the next one, because I have a way in Socrative when I'm building these questions that I can click which ones are the right answers. And that way, when you select it, it tells you immediately if you got it right or not. That might be worth trying, isn't it? That way, you aren't really focused. Well, that's bad. I just want to say you're not really focused on listening to me. Well, that's not exactly what I'm shooting for either. I don't need you to listen to me, but it's kind of nice if we all together are learning the things that we need to know, so that you don't zone out during the explanation of why you got it right and why you didn't get it right. Let's go to the calls. Let's go to 646 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
My name is Kingsley.
Hey, thanks for calling. What can we do for you? What's your question?
I just passed my CCNA. I'm thinking about doing the Security Plus.
Sure.
My first time watching Professor Mason's, and I'm really impressed about his videos, and I just want to say thank you to him.
Well, you're welcome, because you're talking to him. One of the things that you say, you've got your CCNA, you've got your Cisco Certified Network Administration. Is that what you said?
CND2.
Okay. So this is one where usually the next step is security. I was talking to someone last night. One of the things I do now is I get online at night and I just play video games. It's my hour or so at night that I get to at least talk and spend time and just veg out. And I was talking to someone who in the game that was working on cybersecurity, and they were having the similar thing. Like, where do I go next? Do I go to CASP, which is the higher level security? Do I do Security Plus? Do I do CISSP, or one of those ISC squared certifications? Do I do CEH? You know, all those questions come up. And one of the things that I will often tell people is you should find out what the employers are asking for. So if you already got a Cisco certification or a networking type certification, you want to get into security, look for the security jobs that are out there and what they're asking for. I think that's one of the best things you can do. A lot of security places will tell you straight up, we want a CISSP. It's sort of the gold standard of security certifications is the CISSP. But a lot of places recognize also it's kind of hard to get a CISSP because you need a lot of experience in the field, and you have to be sponsored by somebody to get that CISSP certification. So not everybody will have one, even if you are knowledgeable enough in security to be able to do this. So don't feel that you can't get a job where somebody says, we want a CISSP, but be aware that they're really looking for more experience. So have a look at go to the Indeed.com, the Monster.com, the Career Builder, go to those sites and see for those roles that you're interested in, what certifications are they really looking for? And maybe that can help you give you a direction. If nobody in your area wants a CISSP and everybody wants a CASP, well, then obviously that's probably the direction you want to go. So that's one of the things that that really does come to me is don't just get a certification to get one. There needs to be a reason behind it. So figure out the reason, and that's really going to help you answer the question ultimately. Does that help?
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Good luck with your studies. You're quite welcome. There's so much to go through too. The Security Plus certification is a good one. It's extensive, but a lot of organizations either don't want a certification, they don't ask for a certification. Maybe the Security Plus is a bonus on top of that, being able to go through those pieces. There is, let's see what else questions have come up. Boy, quite a few questions have come up. Question, how many questions on the Security Plus are only about port numbers for protocols? Well, in the exam objectives, they tell you exactly how much of the exam is about port numbers for protocols. And they give you the list that's there. Now, the challenge, of course, is that the number of ports and protocols are a small section within a larger domain that's part of many other domains on the exam. So in the big picture of things, it might be one line or two lines in this huge document of things you would need to know. The problem is that if you happen to get a question about ports and protocols, then it's 100% that you're going to get one, then you have to know it. The only way you're going to pass this exam and really be ready for anything is if you know everything that's on the exam objectives, even if it's only a single line of information. A little bit more of a challenge. Where do you keep your private key? What if you lose it? Now you're thinking. You keep your private key private. You want your private key to be something that you have. You put it somewhere safe. You back it up. It's a digital file, of course. Don't just put it on a USB key. You're going to lose the USB key. The USB key is going to go bad. Don't just have it on one file, one document, on one hard drive or one storage device. You're going to lose it. Make sure you back it up. Most private keys also allow you to add a passphrase to it. So even if somebody got a hold of the private key, they would then have to somehow brute force your passphrase to be able to have access to that private key. But you don't have to. But obviously, just like a key to your house, a key to your car, you keep it safe and you keep it in your control. Same thing applies to private keys that are digital. You just want to be sure that you don't have it. If you lose it, then you have to tell everybody you lost it, and you have to create new keys. Just like if you lost the key to your front door of your house, you have to tell everybody who has a key to the front door, all right, we got to replace the lock. All your keys are bad now. I'm going to have to hand out new keys. Same exact thing. And there's a very common way to send a revocation for PGP, for example, and a public key server. You can tell the key server, don't use this one anymore. Let's use a different one. But you have to know your passphrase to be able to do that. That's important to have that there. What games do I play? Currently, I am obsessed with The Division. So Tom Clancy's The Division on Xbox One is where you will find me doing very badly, trying to earn Phoenix credits so I can get that new SMG that is a 203 instead of the poor 164 that I'm running now, or is it 163, 164 that I'm running? Very, very low end, but that's the best thing I've been able to find in SMG, and I've already talked too much about it. But that's what I'm currently playing. I did a lot of Diablo up to that point. Diablo 3, I like that. Got a World of Warcraft. There's plenty of things I go through, and that's just my hour or two at night. So it's a good way for me to die a lot because I'm an old guy with bad reflexes, and these young kids in there that play 8 hours a day completely annihilate me. So at any point, if I'm ever feeling good about myself, I think I got this game. I am killing this game. I get just leveled immediately. So I understand my limitations. I know where I stand in the entire list of who's big and bad. I know where I am. So I kind of stay over here. And being able to not be in a problem, obviously that's kind of an obsession. I want to be sure I get the best things, and it's always hard to be able to do those things. What I've tried to do is that my sons, both are everybody. My two sons and my daughter are all gamers, And so I try to play games that they're playing, but I can't play. They're on a PC platform. They don't want me playing with them. They don't want dad's not going to go in an incursion with them. That's not their thing. They're still in high school. My daughter's in college. No, we don't want to do that. But I want to play the game so that I can talk to them about it. Hey, where do I go? Now I've got this. How do I get more Phoenix credits? Where should I go to get the best SMG? Where should I go to get the best marksman rifle? That's a conversation that I can have with my kids now. So it's fun. And we talk about all kinds of things. E3 is coming up. We're all wondering who's going to announce what at E3. It's a lot of fun being able to do that, being able to work through those. Yes, you tuned in about Security Plus, and I'm talking about World of Warcraft and wondering if I'm going to upgrade and get Legion at that time. Is it going to steal me away from the Division? We're going to find out, and being able to do that. That's one of those things, when it's one of those, especially if you do what I do, where I create content every day. I write questions every day. I put things on the internet every day. I'm always constantly either pulling in information about what I'm doing or creating more content. And it's such a challenge because the Xbox, you can't see it, but it's right there. It's right behind me. It's looking at me. It's right now. It's looking at me. I can tell. It's there. Now, normally you can't see it very well. I don't think you can see it at all. There is a big television screen that is just behind this desk, and it has everything. It's a copy of this switching screen. Spill my coffee. That's right here. And it's used for me to be able to see what have I got queued up, what is next on the list, what's coming up on these other pieces. I can see everything that I've got queued up for graphics. I can see the status of the stream. Everything is up there on the screen for me to be able to see this. Normally, that's behind me. So all I have to do to play in the Division is this. Then I'm on the Division. So it is a challenge to not do that during the day. So I've got it set up. So it's a carrot and then the reward. It's leading me on. I create my content, and my reward at the end of the day is to turn around and be able to do that. That's a little bit more of the challenge of not doing it during the day. Now, I will say today it was a little bit more of a challenge because I did not finish my dailies yesterday. None of you really care about this if you're not playing the Division, but there's 15 Phoenix credits. I need 100 to get a new gun. So you see how it drives you? So I had to finish that this morning before anything. I got up early. How stupid is that? Well, it's what drives us, isn't it? I liked it. I had fun. Other questions from the chat room. Let's go through blah, 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 Q&A. Well, no, we really can't show you my Xbox One. It's not in it's an Xbox One. What would I be showing you? I do have the Pro controller that I like, and I've got a integrated headset, nice covered one, so I can kind of tune everything else out and focus on those pieces. In my security videos, I advised you to utilize a DMZ, and almost everybody who has a firewall and security also has a DMZ. In fact, many of our home-based routers, the wireless routers that we use, many of those also have a DMZ built into those. If a server is placed into this zone from the internal network, would I use the internal IP address to access it, or how? The way that most places do this is they do use an internal address. They set up a separate internal network to be able to host the DMZ. So just as you've got a 10.1.1.0 network, a 10.1.2, a 10.1.3, maybe at home it's a 192.168.1. Maybe you set up an entirely separate subnet that's a 192.168.2, and you say, that's my DMZ, and all the IP addresses in there are going to be on the .2 network so that I can set my firewall and set it up so it's very easy to access that information from the outside. On your home-based wireless routers, there's often a DMZ port. There's a physical interface on the device you plug your server into, and now it's in the DMZ. I guess you could plug a switch into that as well, and now it's in the DMZ. And you don't have to change any IP addresses. It does all of that for you, and it keeps it separated. Even though it's on the same IP subnet, it firewalls it out properly so that people can access it. Because you don't often get multiple public IP addresses. Even if you are a large organization, you don't want to use a lot of public IP addresses unless you really have to. So you tend to put everything on an internal address if at all possible. That way you've got conservation of IP addresses. You can focus on using your external IP addresses for things like multiple IPsec tunnels, or use them to connect to other sites out there by IP address. There's much better reasons to use an external IP address on something like that rather than using it for a DMZ, because it's very easy to NAT and send something to a DMZ, a NAT and send it really to anywhere in your network. We're just calling it the DMZ, and we're setting up a special security profile for it. But it's no different than any other internal network that you might be using. We've just changed the security and how people are accessing it. That's really one of the keys. I did give out the continuing education unit keyword somewhere in that first hour. So you can very easily listen to the first hour and get that special favorite keyword to be able to send to me. And that is indeed the best way to get that special favorite keyword. I don't know why I said favorite. It's not really, well, it's my favorite. And then I keep track of these. It's really a challenge. I suddenly get tons of emails coming in every Wednesday, and then I just go through them usually in the afternoon and start sending these things out. But if you're watching this a year later, you could send me the continuing education word for this month, for this current video, and I will send you an hour. So you can watch it on the replay and still get continuing education units, and it can be any replay and get continuing education units. I don't care. And from CompTIA's perspective, they don't care. You could even be using these continuing education units for other things that you're doing. You could be using these. I have folks that watch these for work, and they get work credit for watching these because they send me the continuing education. I send them back their digital signature certificate. So it's very easy. In the network objective 1.3, explain network design elements and components. Can you give me an example of what a question would be for NAC? I can. In fact, in my video, I really described NAC as being that 802.1x functionality. This is the network access control. Overall, NAC is something that is everyone talks about, but a relatively few people implement it because it's not easy to implement. NAC is really hard and really complex to implement. Things have to be just right. And you have to put a lot of emphasis on how you're going to be implementing this because it integrates in stations with switches with a backend process. There are multiple layers that you have to go through to get network access control to work properly. Overall, of course, network access control is I plug into someone's network. I don't get any access unless I authenticate properly. That is the access control of the network. That's something we commonly don't run into. If I'm in a conference room, I've walked into a building, I'm in a conference room, I plug in, I'm on the network. That's a bad thing. So that's a good reason why you want to put NAC in, is to prevent somebody from plugging into any network connection and having access to everything that's on the inside of your network. Obviously, that would be a bad thing. So you want to avoid that if at all possible. And there are software implementations of NAC. There are hardware implementations of NAC. There are some places that very commonly integrate it with 802.1x. And in my video, I describe that entire conversation with 802.1x and how that operates. Wouldn't the ability to get to a network through a health server be used for NAC? I don't know what a health server is. Maybe that's something else you were working on. Getting a CISSP sponsor seems kind of difficult. Yes. I wonder if there's a better exam to study for because of that requirement. Better is a relative term. And this is a common question I get is, what should I study for? What is the best thing I should do? I don't know. Everybody has different goals. Everybody has a different reason for getting a certification or for not getting a certification. Sometimes that reason is that you have a job you're working towards and the employer is looking for a certain certification. That's a pretty good reason to get a cert. Maybe you have a personal need to be able to learn a set of skills. It's interesting to you and you think you'd be a better person and better employee, a better job owner, a better whatever you're going to be by knowing that information. I'm going to go learn that cert. Great. That's a perfectly good reason to get a certification. But with security, when you get from networking, you go into IT security, it is a very tight group. And by this, I mean, it is a very important that you maintain relationships in IT security, especially as you grow up and go up the scale in security from an IT security engineer into IT security management, into CIO. It becomes really important that you know the other people doing security. And I got to tell you, if you're someone who is in IT security, this is going to happen for you anyway, because there will be trade shows, there will be local security user groups, either for Cisco or for VMware or for Palo Alto Networks or for Checkpoint or for pick your favorite security thing, and there will be a user group meeting for this. So you will end up meeting people in security, both online and in person. And most of those people who are been in security for a while have worked towards their CISSP because, as I mentioned, it's a bit of a gold standard in the security arena. So then it becomes very easy. You can ask somebody, do you have your CISSP? Because I'm working on mine. I need somebody to sponsor me. All right? And really sponsoring means they say, yes, this is a person who does IT security. They're not looking for a midnight call. Hey, man, I'm really going off the wagon on security. That's not what you're there for. They want validation that you are getting the certification because you've been doing this for a while. You can have somebody vouch for you. That's what it really is. And they get that there. Okay. Health server remediation server is not a component of NAC, but it can be a component of NAC. A remediation server, a health server, completely optional, rarely implemented properly, if at all. I know health server kind of did sound like a medical server, didn't it? Remediation server is really a more common term to use there, but it's effectively the same thing. And it's because, take that process we were just going through. One very common thing that you have with an implementation of network access control is many implementations of that will also put something in place called a host check. Host checking is one where and I also see this with VPNs, which, by the way, have nothing to do with NAC. But if you're logging into a VPN connection, that VPN connection can also perform a host check of your computer. So look at your machine. I'm logging into my VPN and gaining access to my internal corporate network. But before I do, the VPN server says, hold on, before you can come in, are you running the latest patches? Is your application up to date? Are you running antivirus? Is it turned on? What version of antivirus are you running? Do you have the latest signatures for antivirus? If any of those things aren't the way that the administrator expects them to be, they can say, sorry, you can't get in. You're not secure enough to be on our internal network. I'm going to stick you on a remediation network, which means you get sort of partial access to the internal network. You get access to a special part of the network where there may be a web page that pops up that says, here is the test that you'd failed to be able to get on the network. Click here and you can download the latest stuff. That's really all it is. Sometimes it just pops up a message saying, nope, you can't get in. Sorry. Take care. Drive safely. The implementations are very different in how somebody implements that, but it's not a component of network access control, but it can be. It's certainly not something you commonly see in most implementations, although many people would like to be able to do it, because that was a very complex thing I just described. You have to set up a set of policies. You have to have some type of method to be able to check the host. That method has to know all the antiviruses there ever are, or at least the large majority of them, has to know what the latest versions are, has to know what the latest signature update version is, and then it has to be able to stop you and send you somewhere else. It's complex to make all of that work properly, which is why you don't generally see it working properly on people's network. But it's when somebody gets it working right, and I've implemented a number of these with VPNs where you do host checking and there is a way to drop someone off and be able to gain partial access to the network for remediation. I absolutely have set those up and they work great when you set them up properly and you have the right software. Through VPN, it's so much easier. NAC, there's so many moving parts to be able to get that to work. But again, there's some that in a closed NAC environment where that's already thought of and it works, well, then rock on. That'd be an easy thing to do. And make that. What's a good website to learn basic security? I wish there was a basic security website. I think the basic security is Security Plus. That's probably what most people think about with basic security. Although a lot of people think basic security is, how do I keep my browser secure? How do I surf the internet securely? What do I need to do? What do I need to configure on my browser, if anything? What software do I need to run on my computer, if anything? Those are important things. Why would you install a Linux desktop antivirus? Well, I guess you would do it because there are some Linux viruses out there. There's not a lot. The virus people, the folks writing the viruses, aren't really going after Linux so much from a virus perspective. They're not really trying to run a lot of malware, but there is malware for Linux. There's malware for Mac OS. There's malware for Android. There's malware for Windows. There's malware for everything. And that's why you would install, because these days it's not just antivirus you're installing, it's antivirus and anti-malware. They're all bundled together these days, at least some level of them. And that's why you would install them, because there's viruses out there. Now, if it's a server and that server is not surfing the internet, you're not installing a lot of software from third parties, it's all coming from well-known repositories, then you probably don't need antivirus. My web servers don't run antivirus. I'm not on my web server installing a new application and running from there. I'm not surfing around the internet on my web server. So I don't run antivirus. I have other security controls on my Linux server to prevent brute force attacks, to do a limit of the traffic going to my server, to do load balancing. I have an IPS that's in front of all of that. I have a reverse proxy that's in front of all of that. So there's a number of security things that I have in front of my web servers, but not antivirus. It's very unusual to see people running antivirus on a Linux device. But as we have more and more people running Linux on the desktop, I think we will indeed see more and more antivirus, because you're seeing cryptoware. You're seeing the ransomware get installed on people's machines, encrypting files, and then all of your data is now not there anymore. And that's a problem. And that works across all operating systems. So there's a version of that cryptoware for pretty much anything these days. Challenging. On the objectives, they say implement security configuration parameters on network devices. Would the GTS Labs be helpful in helping me learn this objective? Well, you can get that free hour and try it yourself. I'm going to try to log in to the live labs. It logged me out because I haven't been here in a while. Yep, that's not going to work. Let me refresh my page and log back in. Pardon me. Let's have a look. There we go. Let's look at Security Plus, and let's look at the different options that are here. Trojans and malware protection, establishing host security, program layers, vulnerabilities, scanning, PKI, certificate management, application security, radius. There's a good example of setting up those components on the network. Transitive trust, user rights and permissions, routers, routing protocols, firewall, rule-based management. There's another one that would be configuration parameters of those network devices. Again, firewalls, configuring NAT firewall, configuring port forwarding, configuring an email service and client, configuring IPsec, working with host names, DNS configurations, SNMP, iSCSI, mitigation to deterrent, patching, data encryption, data backup. All these are labs. Just goes on and on and on. Load balancers, cloud computing, RAID, configuring software RAID. There's another one, setting those things up, clustering. So yeah, I would say it certainly has a number of the things you would need to set up. Firewall evasion, honeypots. Dang, there's a lot of stuff in here. That's pretty nice. Yeah, I think it would be helpful. I think you can do those. That would be one, to be able to do that. I like that, being able to work through those. But you can, of course, get that free hour. ProfessorMesser.com/seclabs, and try it yourself. Maybe that will help you there. Let's have a look at this piece, being able to. Are there good certificates to get with the goal being the CISSP while I build up networking within the IT security community? There are. And some organizations like Security Plus, some like the Certified Ethical Hacker, which is, as many of you have watched me before, I don't like the company that manages the Certified Ethical Hacker. I like the cert, but I don't like the people that give you the cert. It's one of those, and I'm not sure why Certified Ethical Hacker caused Siri to do that. But that's one where there's a few like that. Often when you're getting into security, And as you do more security, you'll find that the certifications become more focused on a manufacturer's specific set of technologies. So for example, when I worked for Palo Alto Networks, I was a Palo Alto Networks security expert, or whatever we called it, CNSP, security for the certified professional. And I knew everything there was to know about that Palo Alto Networks firewall, and setting it up and doing IPsec and doing natting and setting up security policies and configuring URL filtering and doing intrusion prevention and looking through and doing data filtering. And everything about that device, I could set up and configure it because I got certified on that technology. There's a completely separate set of certifications for checkpoint firewalls. There's a completely separate set of certifications for SourceFire, IPS, but they have their own certifications. A different set of certifications for almost every firewall manufacturer, because there you're getting into such specific details of how that particular technology works that you kind of need very specific certifications. That is one where I think that was really the important thing about this. And so they can give you, and if you aren't in security, ask a security professional in your organization, if I wanted to do more security, what should I be doing? Go to some of these trade shows or user events, and go to those and say, what should I be doing? If I want to do what you do, what would you recommend I do? And they'll tell you, I'll set up a lab here, do this, get this certification, that type of thing. Yes, purchasing question dumps is not a good investment. I'm sorry. Should have asked me. I would have told you. I tell you all the time. So that would be why. Yeah, the certified ethical hacker. The content on the certified ethical hacker is good. The organization themselves have shown that they have not taken appropriate controls to protect your private information. And multiple times the company managing the certified ethical hacker have been hacked and private information has gotten out to the internet. So I just don't trust them, and being able to do that. I would ask that if you are in the chat room and you're discussing things that are outside the scope, certainly things that are unauthorized training materials, I would ask that you don't do that, because then I'd just delete it. And then you don't get to say anything in the chat room anymore, which is sad. I don't like doing that. But that's why I'm not a big fan of the CEH. There are other places you could go to learn that, actually even better than that. SANS is a good example. SANS has awesome training. And I would consider it to be a higher quality than the certified ethical hacker. And I would consider it to be broader. And I would consider it to be more legitimate in the security industry than that. It's sans.org, SANS.org. And they do training everywhere. They're a big organization that does a lot of things. SANS is an organization that doesn't do training. They have great resources. The stuff that they do online is fantastic. Their Internet Security Center, isc.sans.org, has some great, there's the Internet Storm Center. Fantastic resource for security and being able to find out what's going on in the world out there. See if you can do that too. There's good stuff out there, and you should be able to step through it and work through those too. I think that's fantastic stuff. And being able to step through those pieces. I like anytime that you're getting some type of security training, it's valuable. Being able to really understand how IPsec is working behind the scenes, understanding how this natting process works and what's going on, understanding really any of those pieces becomes important, because now it doesn't matter whose firewall you work on. IPsec works the same way every time. And then it's going to ask you for a phase 1, and it's going to ask you for a phase 2. And you'll know what to expect, because although the front end interface is different between firewalls, you'll still be able to decipher the way that particular interface works for that firewall. So that's why I mention that. That's why I kind of you've heard me say negative things about those folks that manage that piece, but that's okay. If you are already in a class, then learn what they're giving you from the EC Council. Learn the information that they are teaching you as a first step. You're not learning about hacking. You're not even close to learning about hacking with the CEH, even though the name says Certified Ethical Hacking. That's sort of a marketing thing that they do. It teaches you, though, about some very good security technologies, and it's a good jumping off point for you to go to. It's disappointing, I think, that the company has not done very well with people's personal information, but that's the way the world works. Do I recommend the seminars that SANS and other organizations put on if you're just getting started? Some are very expensive to go to. The SANS seminars are, and the training, really expensive. Training for security, though, in the security market is relatively expensive. It's a very specialized set of knowledge. It's hard to find good trainers for security. It's a very complex set of things you need to learn. So it involves additional training components, usually with additional servers or technologies. Takes a while to put this content together. So it is going to cost a little bit more than taking a class on Microsoft Word. It's just sort of the way it goes. But there are a number of local user groups and a number of local trade shows. I say more regional trade shows. They may not be local to you, depending on where you are. But there are a number of regional security trade shows out there that you can go to where there's a small regional floor of all the big security vendors. And there are usually presentations that are given throughout the day too, where you can learn a lot of great stuff. So check around with user groups especially, and they'll usually promote the local regional trade shows as part of the user group. Like, does everybody know this is coming? So if you're somewhere near a large metropolitan area, if you're an hour or two away even, you can make plans to go for the day at least. Attend the trade show, sit for a number of the presentations, and learn some things that way. And probably more importantly, network. Not computer network, but person-to-person network. And in security, that's really important. Maybe, and this is kind of how I got started in security, I learned a lot about networking, got into network analysis and troubleshooting, understanding exactly how the protocols work over the wire, and then I started applying that knowledge into security. I wrote a book on Nmap, and that just sort of got me into doing more and more and more security things, and eventually then finally with the firewall company. And that was fun. I think there's a very important and very necessary need in really worldwide, especially in the United States, but worldwide, to have very well-trained people in security. We don't have enough. And it's a very nice field to be in, not just for the things that you learn, because there is a wealth of information you would ever learn in security. You can't learn everything there is to know about IT security, which is great. But there is also a nice salary associated with that. So there are good reasons to step into those roles as well financially. So I think that's very good. A very good reason for getting into security if it's something you enjoy, because I sure did. It was always something. Most people I see when they're thinking about getting into security, they think it's penetration testing. That's all they know is pen testing. They don't know that there's a huge networking component to it, that there is the encryption and certificate management and PKI, that there's a need to do log analysis, and there is intrusion prevention, there's next generation firewalling, there's cloud-based sandboxing, there is VPN technologies, there is two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication, there's physical security associated with that. There's a huge gamut to go through. And being able to work through that. And it never ends. There are things you could do with security your entire career and never finish learning about IT security, almost like anything else in IT. So it's one of those things. What can I learn about Nmap? Nmap is enormous. There are hundreds of training pages. I get that. Nmap, for those not familiar, network mapping is what that stands for, but it's a much more than just a network mapping tool. Nmap is a remarkably extensive and powerful analysis tool, security tool for your network that will not only find open ports in a server, but can identify what services are running on those open ports, and can even potentially even tell you what version of the service is running on those ports, all without actually using the service, all without authenticating or starting up the service, using it. Just by looking at the packets that are sent back and forth, it can tell you almost everything about that particular server. It is an incredibly powerful tool. And if you really understand how to use it, you can do things that are quite remarkable on the network. It was a lot of fun. I started writing an article on Nmap to put on my website. I thought it would be maybe a 5 articles, a series of 5 articles on Nmap. And it turned out to be a book. If I had like 200 pages, stuck it together, and I had an Nmap book. And there was one where I would, of the 20 different types of Nmap scans, I would run the scan, capture the packets, and then annotate the packets and tell you, here's what Nmap is doing when it sent this packet, and here's what it did with the response that it got back. So you really got into the nuts and bolts of how Nmap was working under the surface. Have not updated that book in well over 10 years, but that was a lot of fun to do. The best Nmap book by far these days is from Theodore himself on nmap.org. Get that book. That book is fantastic. I love it. So it really goes into why you would run this and what he's been able to find with a particular scan over time, because he's obviously run Nmap probably more than anyone, certainly as much as anyone else. And it is remarkably interesting what you would find. Earlier in the chat, someone was talking about Nmap and how you can bring down a network with Nmap. You absolutely can bring down a network with Nmap. When you run certain scripts and certain types of Nmap scans run in a certain way, it becomes a denial of service attack device. And that's if you don't know what you're doing, you can break stuff. So you do have to know what you're doing. Fortunately, the default settings for Nmap will hardly ever break anything. It would be very hard for the default settings to break anything these days, although they have. I had a old internet router from my internet service provider, and I would run an Nmap scan to it, just a simple scan. Show me the open ports. It would stop working. Have to be rebooted. And I got them to swap it out for something newer that could handle that. But you do run into those situations, sort of a corner case where that was the case. And if you don't understand what you're putting into the Nmap command line, you need to take a step back and research that, because you can put in settings at the Nmap command line that will annihilate someone's network. So make sure you understand what you're doing, and never perform an Nmap scan of a network where you don't have permission. Never, never, never. Just a bad idea. I've told this story before when I worked as senior director of voice and data networking for a call center. It's a third-party call center outsourcing company. So we had thousands of people taking phone calls on a call floor. And somebody who was a consultant, we didn't realize who did it when it happened, but as normal part of the day, suddenly our phone switch went down. This was in the day of traditional phone switch, PBX. And our phone switch stopped. So suddenly the thousands of seats of phone calls suddenly stopped. All the calls disappeared. No calls were coming in. For someone who's running a call center, this is bad. So we started gathering information from our switches, from our routers, from our firewall, trying to figure out what was going on. Someone was not running Nmap, but they were running an intrusion testing device. They were wanting to run and see, can this find a vulnerability on a server, do an intrusion check on that, and then actually perform the test. That was bad. So they were effectively penetration testing on our internal network, and then hit the phone switch, which was definitely not prepared for the type of penetration test that was going on. And it crashed the PBX. Now, of course, you could say that a PBX really shouldn't be crashing when somebody performs a penetration test, and you'd be right, but you shouldn't be running penetration tests against devices that you don't know are out there for that very reason, because some devices just can't handle it. My internet router was a good example, and that phone switch was a good example. And of course, we finally found the logs on the phone switch, because most phone switches at that point running Unix. So we had a log, went back, found the IP address. It was a consultant. Took the consultant in the room, put a light over his head and say, you need to spill the beans right now. What's going on? Because he erased everything. We did find information in his Windows registry that pointed back to a very well-known piece of software that's designed to do penetration testing. And we said, aha, that's been installed on this machine. And we, of course, told you, we know that you were running this. Tell us what happened. He told us what happened. He grabbed his stuff and walked him out the door. And then did some hardening of our phone switch. But that obviously cost us a lot of money. That's the type of trouble that you can create on an internal network, doing what he thought was a normal scan to these devices on the inside. And of course, we didn't know exactly what his reasoning was. He wasn't there to do penetration testing. That wasn't why he was hired. He was doing something completely different with Windows servers. But that's what you can break. You have to be very, 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 very careful when you're going out and doing those things. You never want to run into that scenario where you're the one who just brought down the mission critical, most important application ever in the history of the company. And if that doesn't run every day, you're in trouble. And then you just crashed it by running a scan. You don't want to be that guy. Or maybe you should have an updated resume. That might help to be able to do that. Not where you want to be. Well, we've come to the end of 2 hours. That's my little moral of the story, something you can take with you on your travels throughout IT security for the rest of the month. Remember that we have plenty of things happening up until the Security Plus study group for next month. As those of you recall, we do have one scheduled for June the 22nd. You can join us then. That would be fantastic. Of course, prior to that, I have A Plus study group and a Network Plus study group in June as well. You might want to join us for those. And of course, you can always find those at professormesser.com/calendar. Find out everything that's going on. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Thanks for your questions in the chat room. Thanks for joining us for the Q&A during the first hour. I look forward to going through all of your continuing education emails that have been sent to me. I'll try to go through most of those today and catch up on the ones that I've missed. And until then, we'll probably see you next month on the Security Plus study group. Thanks for joining us, everyone.